Good afternoon. So thanks to the ITC team, thanks to CyberSafe as well for being here today, and the IET. Really good to be here. I mean, amazing venue, and sort of see everyone out there sort of taking the photos. It's a great topic, great to have everybody here talking about it. What I want to do this afternoon is literally just go through some of the things that I'm seeing and have seen, what's happening sort of internationally, nationally, across companies, and that's both across their boards and also their cyber teams. And then really what that means for us and potentially how we need to be thinking about it, because this is all about what our different perspectives are and how we're weaving it together for those security and organizational outcomes that ultimately make all of our organizations successful. So a little bit of a background on where I've come from. So like most people in cybersecurity, I don't have a traditional start into all this. So as much as I loved sort of coding and playing around with computers, I fell in love with those first, and then played around with those for a bit and sort of did a whole bunch of things there. But I always had that passion for technology. And then one year, when we were on Exercise in Vegas, it's a hard life, I know. DEF CON effectively stumbled into the same hotel that we were staying at, and I spent the weekend getting sociable with hackers who then wanted to know about flying, and I was wanting to know about the hacking, and a good weekend was had by all. And then I just turned into this really annoying person in the Air Force that was like, we need to be thinking about cyber. We need to be thinking about the challenges, we need to be thinking about the risks, and we need to also be thinking about the opportunities. So did that for a bit, moved into the operational side of, I think, cyber is the best way to describe it, where it was how do we as a nation sort of make best use of some of those opportunities and operational aspects around operating within the cyber domain. But once I left military, I then sort of went into industry, but also as part of that, sort of this is all about how we work as a community and how we actually work together. So things like working with the hacker community across large organizations, so large multinationals, up to sort of like international and global level with like UN agencies, but also how do we help with getting the next generation going forwards with founding competitions such as Cyber 912, which is how do we form those diverse skills that we need across this sort of generational challenge that we're facing at the moment. But as well as that, one of the things that had always sort of struck me is how do we get that commercial experience, how do we get that broader experience into the government, because ultimately a lot of this work is led by government, and government has to be leading the way and setting a really good example. So I stepped into the Cabinet Office to lead the transformation of UK government cybersecurity. So effectively, how do you change the cybersecurity of an entire sector, and that sector being government? And I led the cybersecurity strategy, which was basically setting out the vision and the actions and the structures for the next 10 years. And that was published last year. And then before coming back into private sector. So when I try to speak to my parents about what I do, I mean, the flow of this is fairly sort of like similar as many people can see. It sounds really exciting, but a lot of this is, there is so much knowledge out there that you can't know everything. And actually when we talk about, for example, cyber skills, we talk about those cyber skills as being cyber, it means so much to so many different people. If we look at some of the presentations we've had today, it's gone from everything from knowing about the deep technical understanding of systems and how systems work, through to the broader strategic aspects that we've got the team at Microsoft, for example, looking at. So this is a really, really broad topic where actually, and I'll touch on it throughout the whole presentation, is that this is way more than just the technical. And if we think about it as just the technical, we're missing a huge amount of the problem, and we're constantly just going to be looking at our feet. If we really want to make a difference across our organizations, this is about weaving the technical together with the policy, together with the strategy, and then tying that into the leadership objectives for your organization. Because when we look at it across an entire global landscape, and a lot of our organizations and the organizations you represent here today are properly international organizations. And those boards are dealing with some huge challenges. So if we look at just the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that's caused a massive global shift in what it means for European supply chains. It's caused a massive global shift in what we consider as risk and where that risk sits. We look at the increasing tensions over China and Taiwan and how that is affecting companies that are working in the Far East and the Middle East. So all of those things at board level are massively pressing on the leadership. And then we've got the increase in capacity and the growth in Africa, which is actually quite an exciting place for the opportunities that are out there, but also incredibly challenging from a business perspective. And we're also seeing huge and increasing amounts of cyber activity in disrupting both national and commercial interests out in Africa as well. So the geopolitics that your boards are dealing with are actually really significant. And I touched upon the supply chain challenge in that the supply chains, the historical supply chains that we've had in the past, all of those things that are happening at that geopolitical level are really starting to have significant impact on those supply chains. Because if we think about where sort of industry has gone over the last 10 years, to reduce costs and to make things as efficient as possible, we've pushed for really lean supply chains. We've pushed for really fast supply chains, going from manufacturer to customer as quickly as possible. And we've drawn down on the capacity or that sort of buffer within the system because everything works. But then we get things like, even as silly as a ship getting stuck in a canal, and the impact that then has on everybody's supply chain. And it's things like that that have made really people start looking at what are the new supply chains. And if you're defending a company, and your company and your organization and your leadership are talking about, right, we need new supply chains, that means new suppliers. That means more assurance. That means how do we actually work with those organizations to actually plan out how we can manage our risk. So there's a huge amount of challenge, just touching on geopolitics and supply chains, that actually means that the challenges that governments and international organizations such as the EU are now facing is, how do we secure that? How do we drive industry and support industry to be doing the right things across critical infrastructure? And what we define as critical infrastructure, I think we can probably agree, is more and more being sort of more broadly defined now, because some of the ransomware attacks that we're seeing against what might not be traditionally considered as critical infrastructure, we're now discovering what really is critical infrastructure. And it might be that your organization might not fit the traditional definition, but actually once things start falling over, then you realize actually what is. So for example, the NIS2 directive that the European Union are actually pushing forwards with is a classic example of what can we do to actually increase and do things better at scale. And one of the sort of questions I asked a cyber lead at a large international years ago is, what would be in your big wish list? What would be number one thing on your wish list? If you could have anything really, what would it be? And it was one set of cyber regulations that we build to globally. Because at the moment, the complexity that we and your boards and the cyber teams are facing when managing, delivering, selling product is that there are so many different regulatory standards out there. There are so many different things you're trying to build to, which is adding to that complexity. So things like the EU coming out with an updated NIS directive, increasing the resilience of what it is that we've got, really are a good thing, because it should be giving a bit more predictability into the industry and how we support and how we manage customers and clients. And additionally, you will see that across the US as well. So there's a huge amount of effort going into the US. And the White House team have done a fantastic job with actually getting really good policies out there. But they themselves would admit that actually they're moving really quite fast on this because they see the criticality of what it is that they're trying to fix. So if you look at what the US team are doing, and especially sort of laid out in their national cybersecurity strategy, which is actually a really good read, they're talking about the top three things they're looking at is defend critical infrastructure, so job number one, really disrupt and dismantle threat actors, job number two, and then the third one is shape market forces to drive security and resilience. So it's not just thinking about that critical infrastructure, it's not just going after those threat actors, it's what can we do to shape market forces? And this is where some of that really good collaboration comes in, which is working out how to do that together, because this is a massive team sport. And if we look as well as some of the work that's happening in the UK, I mean, recently there's been the announcement where it's the sanctions against Russian threat actors, so against TrickBot and Conti. So again, efforts to try and disrupt and dismantle some of those organizations. But if you look into some of the wording underneath that, where it's talking about if you actually make funds available to individuals, such as paying ransoms that are on those sanctions, that's prohibited. So we're adding to a whole bunch of complexity here when it comes to the environment we're looking at. And it's not really easy for boards and cyber teams to keep up with this, but that's where it comes down to. This is a team sport. So again, something that's come out recently, it came out in August. So you won't be surprised to hear that government look at risk. So government year on year would look at risk under something called the NSRA. So they're the National Security Resilience Assessment, which used to be sort of a more classified sort of assessment of national risk. But for the very first time this year, that's been taken and elements of it have been made sort of open source under the National Risk Register. So this is open source and you can access it online. This is government talking about what do we consider the key risks facing the UK. And again, this is really worthwhile reading and looking into because it covers off cyber risk and it talks about how the government consider cyber risk and the priorities and the likelihood and impact of those risks. So again, and I've marked up the cyber aspects on the sort of likelihood and risk, so somewhere in the middle, but there's a broad spread of those risks because cyber now touches pretty much every single part of our lives and our landscape. So again, it can be really quite interesting when you start looking across all of the different sectors we've got, all of the different risks and challenges across all of those C&I sectors, because you can't really isolate one of those sectors and say there is no cyber risk there. There is cyber risk everywhere in what we're doing. And if we look at all of those risks and the different perspectives of them, I mean, first of all, just on the technology risk and the platform risk, we've really seen, and it's been demonstrated to us over the last few years, that you don't necessarily have to be attacked because of who you are. You can actually just be attacked because of what you're running on your systems or what software you have, and it's opportunistic. But if it's done at scale, then that can be distilled down and it creates opportunity for the adversaries. And we're seeing platform attacks against OT and IoT, and we're seeing increasing sophistication across those attacks. So this isn't just a, can we disrupt and turn off a piece of OT or IoT? It's how best can we cause maximum impact? How best can we cause maximum disruption and frustrate recovery? Because we're starting to now see threat actors that understand how those IoT and OT systems work. They understand how to make them fall over in a way that's really bad for your organization. It's not just a case of switching them off and letting them be rebooted by the team. So that sophistication and effort is enhancing the adversary outcome that they're looking for. And I think just as I said the word adversary, I always generally talk about the word adversary. And if you look through the government's cybersecurity strategy, I don't mention the word hacker once. Because for me, saying the word hacker is like saying drivers cause accidents. There are good hackers and there are bad hackers. So generally, I find it much easier to say adversary. So that's just an aside, really. The national level risks are still out there. So you can be sitting there quite happily as an organization, but the actions and wordings and words that nationally are put out can then cause national and nation-state actors to have a look, or internal unrest or internal distractions, again, can bring you as an organization into the frame for potential attacks. And then the other aspect is your partners also mean that you absorb some of their risk potentially. Because if you look at potentially some partners, say for example, you were partnering with companies in the Far East or in areas of tension, then you bring them on board as a partner potentially. The threat actors that are looking at them can potentially look at you because they might be looking to disrupt that partnership, have additional impact, and actually just dynamically try to achieve their aims through those partnerships. And then all of those things, when we're looking at and even Microsoft themselves will talk about the challenges sort of faced when it comes to threat actors putting in a lot of effort to chain as much as they can through all of those different technologies and maintaining long year-on-year campaigns to try and achieve their outcomes. So that's what we're facing as individuals and organizations. But then the final piece really to think about is that we're also coming into a period of what I and sort of Jeff Moss would also talk about is super empowered individuals. We have individuals and people across the globe that actually have amazing powers as individuals, either through the development and running of open source tools. So for example, there's a lot of open source tools that are embedded in commercial and non-commercial code that all of our organizations are dependent on. So the security of those tools is really, really key, and they may be run by 2 or 3 people that aren't commercial and just started up as a project 5 years ago. But also things like routing and BGP, and a classic example of that is Valid. So Valid was announced in DEF CON this year, back in August, set up by the team the Cult of the Dead Cow team, and they're looking to basically create that as effectively an open source, secure messaging file sharing app that is highly secure, is not accessible commercially, and it basically allows anybody to embed that into any of their code and then have sort of secure outcomes from it. And they're giving it free to the world. And that has massive impact, both nationally and also commercially as well. So there's a lot going on there when it comes to perspectives on risk. Some great, some not so great. And one of the big questions that sort of generally, and I've heard before, are it's okay the cavalry are coming. So to paraphrase sort of the great sort of Josh Corman, is the cavalry coming? Well, really? Not sure. Because when we talk about large-scale impact or large-scale events, I do hear people, especially on exercises and sort of like TTXs at board level, it's like, well, if it's really bad, the government will help. I heard a laugh there. So if it's a really large event, then actually, will there be capacity for teams like the NCSC or the US or the similar teams on CISA to be able to come in and help you? And the answer is, who knows? But you're the ones managing risk for your organizations and trying to articulate that risk to the board. And even to that extent, if it's a large-scale incident out with your organization, saying things like cyber and digital vendors will be there to help and actually we'll be able to sort of like go out and get some capacity from industry to help us. Again, will there be capacity at that stage? Can we find them? Can we get them on the network as quickly as possible? So the scales and realities of potentially what we're facing are larger than your organization. And again, and I'll touch on that in a second. And those internal and external factors and dependencies are really, really critical. So when we're talking about some of those sort of internal and external factors, it might be, for example, internally, we've been hit by ransomware. Okay, so that's one aspect, but then what impact does that have on your organizations that may be dependent on you, or the organizations that you're dependent on, and what that means for information flow, what that means for actual sort of managing your product or your service or whatever it is you're doing as an organization, and how often is it you're having that conversation of what if across all of those organizations. Or external is tabletopping and thinking about it as an organization. If our supplier got hit by ransomware, the reality of what that looks like for us looks like this. And then those wider and international perspectives of real worst case scenarios of actually, and it might be on the slightly lower likelihood, but it isn't a black swan event. We're looking at things which are realistic and have happened and are really important to be having that dialogue about. So how do we help be our own cavalry is objectivity is the key enabler. And that can be really hard to get into the board or get into your organization, is that objectivity. We've got to sort of move away from this sort of potentially the cyber team sort of just sounding like Charlie Brown, blah, 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 in the corner to the board. It's how do we actually be heard and understood by the board as you're having that conversation. Because you've got to be properly ready for the bad day. And that involves things like paperwork. And the last thing you want to be doing is sitting there, if you've had an incident, with the basics of, do we have an NDA in place? Have we got the right organizations in place to be able to help get on network as quickly as possible so that there are no holdups to this? Because the answer is not, we're going to need 3 days to get sorted first before we can bring a team on board. So making the most of that, of those organizational exercises and things like that, actually helps you, your board, and your organizations. So for example, if you're doing some things like penetration tests and things like that, can you take the results of those penetration tests? Can you turn them into tabletop exercises to reflect to your boards? Because you don't want the board to be having the conversation around, well, actually, this could never happen. It's like, well, absolutely, this could happen, and we've just tried it for real, and we hit all the flags, we hit all the objectives. And then to contextualize that organizationally, also being able to turn around and say things like, well, if this had happened for real, the operational impact of this would have been our clients and our customers couldn't access our services for a week. You can cost that out. You can map that out. You can actually talk about what would that mean to our reputation as we go through. And then you're starting to contextualize and increasingly show the value of security and resilience to your wider organizational leadership team. Because this is about developing those shared operational perspectives. You don't want to be putting effort into your cybersecurity and resilience and trying to trying to sort of transmit up to the board and have it not be understood or translated into those business outcomes. The amount of times where sort of trying to speak to sort of either the cybersecurity team or the leadership team and just hearing this complete cognitive dissonance between the two. And the classic being sort of speaking to the cyber team saying, in a way, we dodged a bullet on this event, but in a way I wish we hadn't, because then the board would listen. And that's something I've heard somebody say to me, which is shocking when it comes down to it, because we don't have to learn from failure at the moment. There are enough examples of what bad looked like. So the other aspect I've got, and obviously because we work in cyber, so we all love a bit of conspiracy and a bit of science fiction. So if we look at where we're going on things like AI now, we've also, I think, got to be starting to think about this is more than just about defending the network. This is about defending the value of the organizations that we're defending. This is about defending the trust that our organizations spend so much money and effort developing with clients and customers. And this means that actually how we actually protect all of those comes into more than just cybersecurity, because that defensive landscape that we're talking about, which is becoming a lot more complex now, how our messaging is received, how we actually counter some of that adverse messaging potentially, if it's spun up by an actor, is, well, actually, what is our defensive landscape as a cybersecurity team? So if we're having somebody doing a sort of adversarial sort of campaign against us, using sort of AI or deep fake and things like that, how do we counter that? Who's even responsible for it? Is it something that is being used against us to try and gain access to the network or compromise our data? Or is it something that's just out there that's actually looking to disrupt the trust that our customers and clients have with us? So what can we do? So for the cyber strategy, you'll see a theme running through it, and I sort of coined as Defenders 1. And that's done on many levels. And I really like it as an expression because I think it's what we've all got to strive for, and it works on multiple levels. So when we're thinking about how we defend in this landscape that we're facing at the moment, this isn't about how the cyber team defend. This is about how the cyber team, the leadership team, and everybody in between work together to defend as one and achieve those outcomes. It also works at the national levels. It's how do government and industry work together. It's how do the hacker and research communities work with industry, and how do we collaborate together. Because this is about making the most of what you have. This is about finding those advocates and finding those people that really make a key difference to the outcomes that we're trying to find, and finding what those key blockers are that are stopping us moving forwards. It's about having agility and being able to have that long-term strategic vision so you can put the flag on the horizon and say that's where we're going, but then having the agility to be able to see here's where the technology is going, here's how we react to that, but still have that long-term direction. It can be really, really hard to do that, but it's absolutely critical because we need to give the teams some stability, and the boards are thinking 5 years in the future, so we need to give them some stability in where we're taking it as well. Because there's a real balance between people that turn around and say, well, we're going to stop every single 0 day as a team. And I've heard some organizations say we have zero appetite for risk. I'm not quite sure how you achieve zero appetite for risk. We've got to be able to be realistic about this. So again, sort of on the sort of strategy going backwards, it's like never stating we're going to be able to stop all of the attacks. This is about if we can actually patch and actually have everything, all the sort of known vulnerabilities taken out of the system, if we can respond to incidents as they happen, and we have the teams and people around us that are sort of empowered and able to do that, then when a 0 day or a larger incident does happen, then we're ready for it, and we can react and respond to it. So it's that team and it's that diverse, empowered teams which are really important. And then when it really comes on to the dialogue around this, the dialogue around it is really important, because when you're looking around at your peers and your peer organizations, It's how do we make this more than just an internal conversation? What are the sector and similar organizations talking about? Can we make this conversation move away from one which is seen as a competitive, sort of competitor conversation, to make this something that is not a competitive conversation, we actually collaborate and support each other. And then finally, the partnership between the cyber team and the board, really, really critical. It's a case of really getting out there, supporting them, but also speaking to the wider community that's out across both the UK and internationally. We do not have to learn from failure. There are enough good people out there doing good things and actually delivering great services, such as like the ITC team and CyberSafe and CyberSafe and all of the other organisations. IET even putting out some fantastic stuff around cybersecurity. So there's loads of capacity, capability, ideas, but we've got to be able to work together on it and properly defend as one. So thank you very much. Look forward to questions and chatting later.